Fabulous. Well done for breaking and being back on time. It's my pleasure. And by the way, well done not only just for being, back on time and doing your short break, but being so engaged and, with all of the speakers for the afternoon. Some fantastic questions, really good conversation. I was saying to a couple of friends, a lot of good break candy for me. It now comes to our keynote presentation, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laura Gilbert, CBE. And I have some words here that I'm going to read out because I want to do this justice, okay? So Laura is the director of 10DS, which is the Data Science and Analytics team in Downing Street. She's director of I.AI, which is the cool name for the incubator for artificial intelligence, also there, and joint chief analyst for the Cabinet Office and the senior responsible owner for the AI for Public Good program. So not much that you do. Deliver expert data and AI solutions into public services and to run a radical transformation agenda promoting the better use of evidence, data and technology in government decision making. And I can say, by the way, we had the privilege of seeing a little bit of that team and their energy in action here at Imperial last month, it was, I think, with the hackathon that happened, and a lecture theater even bigger than this one was just packed with a bunch of very bright people who were thinking about some really cool problems. So that's not just words on a page, that's for real. She also created and spearheads a broader program of innovation, digitalization, and radical upskilling in central government. Of in defense intelligence, quantitative, there we go, quantitative finance. I could just yell at you and you'd probably hear me just as well. And for nearly a decade was CTO of a medical technologies company, Rescon, bringing it from a startup to SMT to acquisition before exiting and joining government in 2020. Here's the plan now. So Laura is going to give us a prepared talk, which she's written specially for you, so amazing. And then we're going to have a bit of a conversation about that here, as we've been doing, and then we're going to involve you in the conversation. And if all goes well, we'll finish at 7:30. So Laura, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You're having a great day.
Yes, yes.
Better. I was a bit worried there. I was thinking to myself, this is going to be a very taciturn audience. It's fortunate you're so good looking. I want even more engagement, if that's all right, because you come out on these things and you talk to people and everybody's very quiet. It's quite intimidating, makes it a tough gig for me. So what I'd like is for you to really get involved, and we're going to do a little bit of a practice run. I'd like you to do me a favor, please. And what I'd like you to do is I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to, the answer to the question is yes. You're going to raise your hand. You're going to shout, yes, as loudly as you can, so all the other people in the other room, they wonder what they're missing out on. Okay, so could you just do me this favor? We're going to go now. Here comes the question. Are you looking forward to my talk? Yes! Thank you very much. That is a really great start. So I'm Laura. I'm the Director of Data Science in Downing Street, and my job is to make sure that the Prime Minister fundamentally has evidence in front of him by which to make better decisions. What do we want? Evidence-based policy making. We really do. I joined government in 2020, September 2020, and it was a time in which there wasn't really a sort of data centre right at the centre of government in Downing Street, but with 6 months of COVID, it became apparent that it'd be really useful to have one. So it's much easier to make the decisions about how you're going to handle a pandemic when you've got, live data coming in. And somebody had the genius idea, Dominic Cummings, that it would be good if we had other kinds of data by which to make other kinds of decisions. And so the team was set up with the remit to improve the use of evidence in government decision making. And as mentioned, I come from quite a non-standard background for a civil servant. Physics undergraduate, briefly wandered into defence intelligence entirely by accident. And then I went back to university. I was a particle physicist. And as a lot of you are quite technical, and some of you may be particle physicists, the job there is to look for very, very specific things to an incredibly high degree of accuracy and prove they exist or they don't exist in a way that no one can argue with. So I did that for about 7 years, did a lot of lecturing, really enjoyed myself, and then suddenly, and rather overnight, the government at the time cut £80 million of funding for particle physics and astrophysics research. So it was a bad day for us. It was in December, and I remember going into the office, and people were clearing their desks out. Jobs were sort of lost if you didn't have tenure. It was quite difficult, but sat down with my supervisor, who said, "Don't worry, we sorted you out. We've got you a job in Fermilab in Chicago." It was winter, so it's about -50 there or something. Not my idea of a good gig. And they said, "We'll pay you $800 a month, about 400 quid, but you can have a free room in a student dormitory. You're one of the lucky ones." No, so, I was thinking to myself, I'm heading rapidly towards my 30s, and this is not sounding like a good deal. So I decided to go and do something else, where something like a particle physics degree would be useful, and I wandered into quantitative finance. And I worked for 3 companies, 3 hedge funds. 2 of them went under, one of them suffered massive financial losses. Nothing to do with me, curious statistical anomaly. But the last company I worked for was a high-frequency trading firm. And it's the first time I really used AI. And what we were trying to do, because, finance is a funny old world. Particle physics, very specific things that definitely exist or they don't exist, and you find a really rigorous way to prove it. And then you argue with people about whether or not you proved it, and you end up with a consensus eventually. In finance, you've got lots of numbers, so the kind of big data thing's still there. Lots and lots and lots of numbers. And the numbers change according to the weather, politics of the day, any kind of wars that might be going on, if somebody dies, and those numbers will go and change. So you're trying to track incredibly tiny needles in a really chaotic haystack of a thing that you could trade off, that you can find just a thread of it might go up or down. Very different sort of world. And it became, very apparent to me, the idea of objective ignorance in this space, the idea that we think that things are very predictable, but actually there's so much about the world that you can't tell in advance what's going to happen, that trying to make predictions about it, a little bit of a fool's game. So having done that for about 3 years, it was a slightly long story, but I ended up moving into a startup. So I went from a lovely salary to a student salary again, second person, in this startup. And we were doing medical technologies, built a lot of algorithms, hopefully saved some lives. Very, very interesting. And here I really learned about evaluation, the importance of evaluation, because when you're working with medical data, doing different things to different people produces different outcomes. And that can be drugs, or it can be sort of interventions or suggestions, or the way somebody responds to their doctor telling them they're a bit overweight. Very variable. So we need to come up with really good ways to figure out what's best for a population average, or what's best for specific groups of people, etc. So having wandered around through the data space, doing everything from the very specific to the entirely spurious, we sold the company, and COVID hit pretty much the next day. So had a nice summer, actually, a few cocktails outside, and then thought, well, I'm going to have to get a job. And I saw this job advertised, and I thought, well, I'll give that a go. And applied for it, got it, and it was very interesting. So I sort of went into the building, was welcomed in, and I sat down with the principal private secretary. He said, "Welcome, very glad to have you." I said, "Thank you." And he said, "I'll tell you, I have one piece of advice." And I said, "Right, great, what is it?" And he said, "You've got 6 months to have an impact." So I said, "Good, okay, well, what do you want me to do?" And he said, "I don't know." And that was the start. So what are we actually going to do? Well, we need to get evidence in front of policymakers so they can make better decisions. That is the entire point, in my view, of data and evidence, so that you can make a better decision. And research tells us that you make about 35,000 decisions a day, which I think explains why I'm so tired. We need data in front of people to make better decisions. And a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis, about 80% of what the data science team does, is there's literally going to be a question. The PM needs to make a decision, maybe some other senior decision makers. And it's usually maybe a matter of policy in some way. So, this thing needs solving. The policymakers got a list of ways that you could solve it. And we're going to go off and try and figure out from the evidence which ones will work. Or in a slightly more complex world, what interacts? If I do this and that, what do I think the impact will be on the outcome that we're looking at, and maybe any side effects? And that's relatively difficult to do, because we have very short turnaround times. Our products, we run on a series of dashboards, and you've normally got between like 1 and 7 days to come up with a reasonably convincing answer before the time to make the decision is gone. So we've got to do our best. We find any evidence we can. We've got to be really good at finding proxy data, maybe international comparators. And we have to be very, very good at figuring out what we don't know. So we have to be able to identify the uncertainty and be good at communicating that to people. So it's sounding rosy, what a lovely job, if you like data, which I do. But actually it's even harder than that, because particularly when we first arrived, and it's still probably the case now, we're working with a series of experts, policy experts. And they might have been working in their field of education for a very, very long time, for example. They might be relatively new, but it's the thing they do every day. They understand the field, they know a lot about it, and when you pop up with a bunch of data and say, hey, I've got some data for you, it might disprove the things that you believe. Funnily enough, people don't like that. So quite often what you get is people sort of going, I don't really need you here, I know everything. I know all the stuff, I understand this area, here you wander in with all your data. And when you do then get into the room, and you might show them something, they might be civil servants that have just been working in the field for a long time, they might be political, and they might have really strong views that are held from years of campaigning and from their party politics, that this is the way it works, this is the way it should work, and this will happen if I do this. And they might not be right. And in fact, they're much more likely to not be right than they are to be right. I'm hoping this clicker is going to start working. There we go. One of my favourite studies, I'm sure a lot of you know this, is the Tetlock study. So in about 85, Philip Tetlock asked 284 political experts to predict the future. And they've got 100 different predictions, and they're fairly simple. So it's along the lines of this thing that's happening at the moment. Is there going to be more of it? Is there going to be less of it? Or is it going to be about the same in 20 years? And they had to go through and predict the future. And they all did this, and 20 years later, he waited to see what happened, and he published a paper, and he said in a rather inflammatory tone, they did fractionally better than monkeys throwing darts at a dartboard. Not a good job at all. Much worse than a minimally sophisticated statistical model, i.e. just take some averages. They did, interestingly, quite a bit better outside their field of expertise than in. So if you're a health policymaker, you maybe done quite well in defence relatively, but worse on health. It's quite interesting. When you do put people in teams, and we know there's a lot about decision-making groups, more diverse teams make better decisions 87% of the time. When you put people in teams, they do a little bit better. So, getting people together is a good idea. But they were very, very confident. So they knew they were going to be right. And we're almost everybody, including me, definitely me, like that all the time. We really think our area of expertise, I will know what the future holds. I'm good at this. Expertise is brilliant. I'm a big fan. We're definitely not Britain is sick of experts territory. But when it comes to actually predicting the future, it's not so helpful. And it's across the board. So there was a study around the same time around technology trend predictions, which showed that expert technologists, again, didn't do better than members of the public, and still only right about 20% of the time. And the confidence is across the board as well. Random study, when you ask fund managers whether they're better or worse than average, 74% will say they're better than average, and the rest of them will say they're average, which is not how averages work. So we're in a world where, as humans, and it's particularly probably prevalent in government just because of the kinds of work we do, people will believe that they're very good at what's going to happen next when we're not. And that's the fundamental of decision making. That's what you're doing in government. You're sort of thinking to yourself, well, there's a problem. And if I do this kind of thing, this thing will happen in the future. And if I do something else, it won't. And it turns out we're not good at that. And the best way to improve is to get data and evidence. So we need to persuade those policymakers that they actually want to hear the evidence. You know, maybe we've evaluated something, we can prove whether or not it works. And we need to really think about how to do that. So it started to become apparent to me that what I was really interested in, outside of, you know, the data and evidence behind the thing, was how to get people to make better decisions. And there's a lot of evidence around that. Different kind of evidence, but there's a lot. It's lovely, isn't it? Oh, gorgeous. If I'm going to make a decision, maybe I go to the spa and, you know, aromatherapy. Somebody tells me all about homeopathic medicine, very evidence-based. And then I go and make a decision. Maybe I'm going to make a decision about, I'm going to buy a house. Any chance of the next slide? No, but there's the house. Oh, it's lovely, isn't it? Oh, gorgeous. Climbing roses, digging into that brickwork. The lovely thatched roof, beautiful. It costs something like £50,000 every 20 years to replace when you have a thatched roof, and there's no way you're going to get a pram through that front door. But it looks lovely. And there's something called analytical priming. When you look at things that are not in any way evidence-based and might be sort of anti-evidence-based, and you go and make a decision, you'll make a less rational decision. If you, next slide please, instead look at some numbers before you make the decision, you'll make a more rational decision. These numbers are utterly irrelevant. This is somebody's email inbox. Everyone's, I'm sure, familiar with XKCD comics. It's mildly interesting if you're, you know, looking at market flows. It's got nothing to do with my house decision. However, if I look at that, or a table, pick up a copy of the Financial Times, and then I go through and I decide to make a decision about what house to buy, I'm going to have one more go at this. Yes, we did it doubly. Right, I'm going back, there we go. I might choose this house. It's horrible, obviously, but jolly practical, not going to fall down, doesn't require a lot doing for it, and the pram will go through the front door. So when we go and talk to our policymakers and we bring our data and evidence with us, it's not just the numbers that matter. The fact they're looking at numbers at all will get them into a more rational brain space. That's very interesting, isn't it? It's a really good life hack. You can do it to yourself. If you think you're about to make, you know, an important decision, pick up a copy of the Financial Times, glance at some numbers, and then off you go, because there's a proven advantage you're more likely to make a good decision. And this is one of, I think, next slide, please. Many, many examples of the framing effect, the way that you present data to people, and I could go on about this for hours, but I won't because it's not the point of talk. The way that you present data and information to people and the way you talk to them makes a huge difference to how well they're likely to then make that decision. And we see it a lot of the time, and we train our team a lot in this. If you go in and just refute somebody's really closely held view, they don't listen to you. No one wants to hear that. There's lots of studies on convincing people, say, who are anti-vax to maybe change their view a little bit. And there's a lot of work on how you relate to the person, validate that they had, you know, a sensible viewpoint, empathize, and then present information that you thought perhaps would have changed your mind. There's a lot in not making people feel stupid. If you walk into a room with somebody who's going to make an important decision and you make them feel foolish, you show them all the ways they're wrong, they may make that decision differently, but they're not going to invite you back. So the influence that you get, a lot of that is around how you present the data, how you present the evidence, and how you talk to people. That's a really good hack. Next slide, please. This is another one. We know from research that one of the very best ways to get somebody to do you a favour is by giving them a compliment. And it works really well if the person giving you the compliment is somebody you like and you believe that the compliment is sincere. Also works if you don't. So, everybody's sat at their desk at some point and somebody's come up to them and gone, oh my God, I love your shoes. Could you just see this report for me? And as they're walking away, you think, oh, why did I agree to that? I hate that guy. But when somebody gives you a compliment, you're much, much more likely to do them a favour. You very good-looking people. When you commit to something, you believe that it's better than it really is. Here's another one. So if you walk into a room and sit down for a talk, and I just start talking at you. Great, might go well, might not. If you make the conscious decision to agree with me, if you commit to my talk by throwing your hand up in the air and shouting, yes, you will believe this talk is better than it really is. It's good, isn't it? One of my absolute favourite bits of evidence. So the way that we talk to people and the way that we communicate, there is evidence around that, and some of that is the most important evidence we have. The numbers about the economy, very important, but so is this. Moving on. So that's basically my job, make sure people have evidence in front of them and get people in the right kind of frame of mind to make good decisions when they've got that evidence. And that brings us on to the AI for Public Good programme, which I'm going to talk to you a bit about now by a slightly rambling route. Here's some stuff this one I made earlier. So, joined government, September 2020. Very quickly realised there are some pretty significant problems that I thought maybe I could help with. And the first one here is Project Rapid there in the middle, a bit of an old logo. But what we were finding was that departments didn't really share data that well. So sometimes they didn't want to, sometimes they just didn't really know how, sometimes they didn't really want you to find out they maybe didn't have it. But you're getting a lot of Excel spreadsheets, and in some cases we were getting as a regular data source a screenshot of a table in JPEG format. So that's the kind of data that's coming in. And, you know, about 3 months after I'd been there, somebody gave me a data strategy, and they said, can you sign off on this data strategy? It's a 5-year strategy, and it's going to solve data sharing in government. And I said, is it? Because it's about 200 pages. Even I don't want to read that. I like data. But more to the point, somebody came up to me and threw on my desk a manual. This is how you make a car. There you go. Go off and make a car, and I go home and I think, I don't really understand what the tools are. I don't know where I'd buy them. I don't know where the parts are. This is very complicated. I don't really know what to do. I need somebody to come and sit next to me and explain how you do that and probably do it with me. Or even better, could you just give me the car? Because it's fundamentally not part of my job to build cars, and I don't really know why you're asking me. So Rapid is an API, so a data sharing system that we built and just gave to departments. No more strategies, here's the actual answer. We'll install it for you, we'll make sure it runs. Dump your data on it, there's a nice graphical interface if you don't code, you can throw your Excel spreadsheets on, and then people can subscribe to it and they get automatic data feeds. And I really didn't understand why we weren't doing that already. When I was working in medtech, I personally built loads of APIs to communicate with the NHS or social care, and it's not actually that hard. So we built this thing and we put it out, and a couple of years later it's had about 200,000 public downloads. So it's on GitHub, it's used in 12 departments, and we know that at least 3 major companies, including one that doesn't pay tax, is using it. So we've had a little bit of impact there, and that's really encouraging. And we put something out to the public for free because, you know, the public paid for it, why not? So shortly after this, we launched the number 10 Innovation Fellowships programme. Got a few people from Imperial on that. Bringing people in with different skills right into the heart of government for a year, go and fix stuff. That's been very successful. They're all AI fellows at the moment. And then last year, in January, we launched Evidence House. And this is a programme that looks to upskill civil servants and solve problems at the same time. So we have big hacks, like the one that was Imperial last month, where people, you know, figure out what the problem is, get a couple of hundred people together to figure out the solution. They've got 3 days to come up with a fully working prototype. We mix people in who can code, people who can brand, policy people. And at the same time, we gave people free upskilling sessions in person, 17,500 hours with people learning to code in Python, for example. And we spent about £500 of our own money. So this programme's been really impactful, and a lot of the solutions we were building were basically machine learning solutions, AI, that kind of thing. So we were sort of in a good position. Not only did we have a lot of people that really wanted to engage with this kind of work, next time there's a COVID, you know, the first time round, it's very hard to find people to handle the data. We've got 850 people on our books we can call in if there's another pandemic. So we'd started up these programs, and the idea being that, you know, 80% of the time, data evidence, PM decisions, the other 20%, let's see if we can meaningfully change the way that government operates sort of in the round, in the areas that we're expert in and know how to do. So when, you know, ChatGPT hit, and there was a degree of almost hysteria, really, wasn't there? people were very worried about two things. One of them was, of course, safety, which we'll talk about. And the other one was like, who should do stuff? And there was a lot of churn for a little while. And then the Deputy Prime Minister announced this new programme, the Incubator for AI, 30 people reporting in through our team in Downing Street who would just be technical experts and just come and try and grab the opportunity of AI, come into government, build things, build solutions. And it was going really well in March this year, so we added another 40 people. We've got 70 now. And this is the programme that I'm very proud of and really enjoying myself. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing. Next slide, please. There we go. So the sort of theory here, because I know a lot of you are quite technical, is that there are an awful lot of areas where code can be reused, and it is not all large language models, to be clear. So we've divided things into bins. Those bits we've built that do public-facing services, things that will interact with the public. We'll be very careful with those, not mislead people. But there are a lot of areas. Project Lex, for example, is to help people understand government regulations, a chatbot so the government regulation is very hard, so you can get clear answers. And we've specified it doesn't hallucinate, fully references, etc. We've got fraud and error, so anything with kind of anomaly detection or where you sort of pick up problems. And there's loads of examples there. Matching and triaging, when you've got to get something to a decision maker much faster and more efficiently. Reusable models again. Casework management there is just really making it a bit more fun to be a civil servant. Let's get rid of all the boring admin stuff and get tools in front of you. And then we've got a big data product as well. So extending on the rapid idea where departments now get a full data infrastructure for free, and it's going to go live to the public as well. You can download it. You don't need to pay Deloitte to come and build your data infrastructure anymore. Off we go. Next slide. And there we go. We build fully sort of reusable blocks, and we pick them up and we match them to each new problem we're trying to solve. I have one more go at this. That one worked. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of them in particular. The first one that hit the press was the AI red box. Let's not fool ourselves, it's a gimmick. Ministers have a red box that they have to read through, and they have very complicated papers, and usually have to sign them off that day, and we'll come back with comments and suggestions. And often that's fine, and it's sort of rote work. Sometimes it might mean that they really have to understand the contents of legislations or regulations or big reports or what's going on in France in this area. And that's quite a big job. And the private secretary has to desperately try and pull together enough information to sort of brief them. And it's hard to do. So we put in just a piece of AI where you can ask it questions about the thing that you're talking about and get answers back. Actually, it's more useful than it sounds because it forms the core technology that we build, everything else that's generative off. And it's turning into something called Redbox Multi-Tool, where if you're a civil servant, you can log in and interact with like a number of different services that might help you write letters or, respond to freedom of information requests, for example. So it is a core technology, but it caught the eye of the press, obviously, and is quite good fun for the ministers. It will also, and this genuinely is important, help to give government an institutional memory. We all know that civil servants tend to stay in the civil service a really long time, but they move every few years. Most of them move a lot. So you can find in a team that if your team attempted something 2 years ago, there's no one there that still knows what happened. And sometimes that means we repeat things. Or we try things that have already failed, and we maybe don't really remember why they failed. And maybe 6 months later, somebody will say, oh, this person worked on it. And it's not a very well-organized system in terms of information flow. By building this kind of system where you upload all of your documents, we can ask it and say, have we tried this before? Where have we tried it? Does it work? What went wrong? Before we go and sink more money into trying it again. So it's actually very important. More excitingly, the Prime Minister, when we launched this, gave us a list of things he wanted us to work on. And it's very useful when the Prime Minister wants you to work on things. It gives you a lot of leverage. One of the things he wanted us to work on was the asylum system. And in an entirely benign way, people come in, they go in very expensive hotels, and it takes us quite a long time, several weeks, to get them into more affordable accommodation, somewhere they can settle. And we were finding we were wasting, well, only about 73% of the available inexpensive accommodations being used at any one time. Quick AI algorithm, and you can get that up to well over 99% and save about £30 million a year. Fine. In government terms, it's not big bucks, but it's a nice little starter project. It sort of tells you where people are going. You can adjust it. It's a fully human decision. It will make recommendations. The human can say, no, that family doesn't want to go there. But it works really neatly. However, these algorithms are really reusable. You build them up, you test them. The opportunity we're going to be using this next is in the electricity grid. And that's a big problem. So we have in the electricity system about a £70 billion over 10 years estimated loss, effectively, from the fact that we don't get people who need electricity onto the grid very fast, and we don't get new electricity providers onto the grid very fast. And it's quite a difficult problem, but it interestingly includes very similar geographical matching to the problem of getting people into suitable accommodation. So pick that up, transfer it over, and hope to save, and we haven't evaluated it yet, we're just starting, but we're hoping to save 70 billion over 10 years. And you know, it's very important. We can free that up to do other things, like make sure the NHS keeps going. So that's one of them. Caddy is, oh, I love Caddy. This is a collaboration with Citizens Advice. And the idea is that people call up and they look for advice, and you know, you answer the phone, and they could ask almost anything. And there is a sort of suite of knowledge in Citizens Advice that says, you know, how you can answer these sorts of questions, but it takes a lot of time to thumb through everything. So we just built, based on Redbox, a nice little interface. And what I think is really cute about this is it integrates directly into Teams or into Google. So you just sort of add it on top of your existing system, and it's got a two-human-in-the-loop decision-making process. So the person who asks the question is the call answerer, not the customer. But it will also go to a supervisor who can double-check that the advice is good, because we really don't want to mess with people's citizens' advice. It does make it a hell of a lot quicker. So it's being run in Manchester at the moment and undergoing trials. But again, because it's really reusable, we can then pick it up and put it, the next target's going to be the bereavement services, help people handle bereavement, deaths, wills, etc. And if that works, then we'll continue to reuse it throughout government. So that's a lovely one. And again, we don't take people out of the decision-making chain, we just make it faster for them. So again, reusable and repeatable. This is my top favorite, Project Pharmacy. It's a little bit of a sad story, really. So there are a lot of people in the UK who are on multiple prescriptions, and that can be really, really dangerous. And the NHS has defined groups of people who are on more than, well, at least 5 prescriptions, and usually have some kind of vulnerability, as being what they call polypharmacy. And it can be dangerous, it can kill you. We think having this kind of multiple and complex prescriptions and it not being right kills about 22,000 people a year, according to independent academic research. It also costs us about 900 million a year in hospital beds and kind of recovery. And it has a really big impact on people's lives. One of the really high frequency results is that people will pass out. And if you're a bit older, you pass out hard, you break something, you go from, you know, potentially another 5 years of independent living to potentially no independent living. It's really damaging for people. So we wanted to address this. And the NHS is, you know, fully aware that this is a problem, recognises it, next slide please, writes it up, and they have a solution which is called the Structured Medication Review, Structured Medicine Review even. And what they'll do is identify patients on these complex prescriptions, and then a pharmacist is meant to come in and spend an hour looking at their prescription, assess it, and if it's dangerous, change it, which is great. It takes them quite a while. And we don't have that many pharmacists, as it turns out, so we only actually managed to get through about 10% of the people who need the Structured Medicine Review. Thus, evidently, the high death rates. Can you use AI to fix this? We hope very much that you can use AI to fix this. There we go. So it's a nice little, this will play a bit, well, it may play, I don't know. I was going to skip through it because I sort of idly assumed that I would have a computer in front of me. Maybe you could kind of skip to the middle a little bit, about a third of the way in of the video. Yeah, go on. About a third of a bit further along. Is that going to work? No, never mind. What I would have shown you would be the AI pharmacist advising the real-life pharmacist which of their patients needed more work and suggesting which drugs to replace or delete from the drug regimen. So it's genuinely really interesting. And again, we're evaluating that at the moment with live patient data that is fully anonymized to find out whether it really works. But I'm very excited about it, and we're really hoping to be able to roll that out and save lives. So this is the kind of thing that we're doing. I think we'll skip on from that. If anyone wants to see it later, you can do. And of course, the next question becomes, what about the risks? And we're all very interested in AI risks. When we sort of first looked at ChatGPT when it came out, all the fears that we all had, misinformation, disinformation, was it going to become sentient and take over the world, were of course very relevant. And I remember seeing this quite early on, the Kurzweil curve. And this harks back to the data. I just find it very interesting. So Raymond Kurzweil is quite a famous American futurist, and he predicts the future. And he's got this curve in which, in 2011, he predicted that by 2023, AI would surpass the brain power of a human. So at the start of 2023, this is particularly relevant as ChatGPT came out. And then by 2045, it surpasses the intelligence of all the humans put together. And that looks like quite scary. Really starts to look like you're going towards the superintelligence, and we don't quite know what we're going to do there. And then I look back at it, he claims 86% success rate. Really? What about objective ignorance? He's making predictions sort of that last 20 years, and he's, the Tetlock lot did terribly. This guy's a genius, isn't he? Anyway, I got very suspicious really quickly and decided to go and have a look on the internet at what everybody else thought. And depending on your source, people do not agree. So he's either weakly or strongly correct, according to independent estimators, maybe about 24% of the time, which means he's much, much better than most other predictors, but it's nowhere near 86%, so I'm a lot less worried than I was about superintelligence on this basis alone. And it's another really lovely kind of cognitive bias problem, in that when he looks back at his predictions, quite often he says, yes, he's not lying, I was right. It's a good one. People routinely use three-dimensional displays built into their glasses. This is 2019 was when the prediction lands, or contact lenses. These direct eye displays create highly realistic virtual visual environments, etc. He thinks that the Oculus Rift, eyeglasses you might use for VR gaming counts, and I think I don't think that that's in the spirit of this. He's a very, very intelligent man, incidentally, a very clever computer scientist. So, it's just the way that we, assess things is very, very biased, and we're all very overconfident. And I think this is a really good example of that. So, one of the points of this is that us trying to predict the future of AI, I think, is genuinely quite futile. What we have to do instead is we have to figure out, well, what can you do if you can't predict the future? You have to figure out everything that's kind of quite likely and have some mitigations for that. You have to use data to track it, so when things change and the likelihood changes, you can adjust accordingly. And you also have to have some strategies for something maybe less likely, but incredibly bad's going to happen. And so we have a lot of roundtables and discussions and AI safety and AI risks, etc. And we go around misinformation, disinformation, hostile states, cyber attacks. What are we going to do about this? This is terrible. But what we don't talk about is the risk of doing nothing. And in government, that's very significant. And I think it affects us in two ways. And this is why we're doing this program, where we're genuinely bringing people in to just build AI. Because if as a government we do nothing, two things happen. Firstly, we miss the opportunity to save the 22,000 lives and 900 million a year. That could potentially lead to a different outcome between the NHS surviving and the NHS not surviving. I think it would be really irresponsible. And then secondly, when you don't have the ability within government or within your organisation to do well at AI, to handle AI, to interact with, if you don't have the experts, it's very difficult to fight against attack. So we know, if you're doing cyber defense against AI, the people you go to are AI experts, real specialists. And we need those people in government if we're going to fight the misinformation and the disinformation and the cyber attacks and so on and so forth. We need the people that I can call on Saturday, as indeed I did, and say, guys, we've got a problem. So bringing people in to actually do this, learning as well as we can, practicing, building our skills, building our toolkits, I think is of crucial importance. And we have a responsibility to do that. And the other question we get a lot, other than what makes you think you can do this, it's just government, is people go, well, it's not going to be perfect. What if your pharmacy misses someone? Well, so long as we're saving, let's say, most of the 22,000 people, that's the benchmark we're looking at. The current system, if it was operating perfectly without AI, we're not going to fiddle with it. It's where there's a really big hole and there's an opportunity to do something better, where it's not good enough. That's where we can step in with this kind of system. Hopefully save lives, save a lot of money, make people's jobs better. And this is what we're actually trying to do with this program. And one of the things we're doing is bringing in genuine, diverse expertise. And I've got a little slideshow here. I emailed some of my team on Saturday and said, do you want to be in a presentation? Anyone that replies within 4 hours, I'll shove it in, just so you can see real humans coming in, where they've come from. Quantum Black, there's somebody from Imperial College here. We've got people from all sorts of different environments and backgrounds coming in and working together. And these are the people that replied within 4 hours. So there you go, you've seen all their faces. Our lead engineers from Microsoft. If Microsoft can hire you, I can hire you. And that is one of the ways that we're managing risk. We're not just having a go, we're getting the very best people we can. And I'm eyeing up a lot of you here. So target the very best people we can to come and do this really well. And we're also trying to get a lot of help from other people. So we do have an assurance model. These are the things we're targeting: safe, secure, robust, appropriately transparent and explainable, improvable, open to challenge. If you think we're doing it badly, tell us and we'll fix it. And with real accountability. And the transparency point, to me, is one of the very most important. So on our website, ai.gov.uk, we put out bits of what we're doing. Not very early projects. They'll go out when we're sure they've got legs. But there'll be an explainer, and there's also the code. So if you're out here and you're an AI engineer thinking, gosh, I wonder what they're doing, if the public doubt that we aren't replacing the decision makers, if they think we secretly are, come and look at the code. And if you see something wrong with it, for goodness sake, tell us. We're trying very hard. But it also really proves that we are trying to be transparent. We're trying to do this really well. And at the moment, transparency is, I think, more crucial than ever, because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation around there, and trust in government is currently lower than trust in advertisers and marketers. And that really depresses me. It makes me feel very sad, because actually most of us are trying very, very hard. But you cannot turn to the public and say, trust us, we're doing a great job. You have to be trustworthy. So we're trying very, very hard to be trustworthy. We're trying very, very hard to do this extremely well, to invite challenge, and to show people and not tell people what we're doing and reassure them that it's fair and it's transparent and it's not exacerbating inequalities, which is really super important to us. So you can go and have a look at this. What do we happen next? More testing. Whole load of evaluation. We're not making assertions about what works. We're going to prove if it's saving money and it's having the outcomes that we want it to. We're going to continue to build our community. And again, we really want people from outside government to engage with this. Could you come and help us? We're looking for people to assure our models independently. Can you come and have a look at it? Tell us if you think we could do it better. And then, of course, we need to scale up, which is why we're hiring more people onto the team. So there's about 25 jobs still going. Any AI engineers, cloud data engineers, assurance specialists, Scrum masters. We're missing a Scrum master at the moment. Come and join us. We're having a genuinely lovely time, and we're very, very committed to doing this really well. So that is my pitch, really. I'm really hoping that some of you after this will want to come in and help us to do this better than we're doing it now. So there's our website. You can drop in for the day. You can apply for a job. You can come and help us with one of our hackathons. Come and build really good solutions. And you can definitely tell us if you think we're doing it wrong, and we'd really appreciate it. So thank you very much indeed for your time. Am I this one?
Yes, have a seat. I know that you will be eager to ask questions, so I'm only going to pose one, which you can sort of bat away if you like, and then we'll go to the room. Fascinating that you talked about Kahneman and Tversky and this framing effect. and do I really want to hear the bad news? But it is, so far, there's been a lot of bad news selling the interest that we should have in all of this. So we know that losses loom larger than gains. Looming losses don't necessarily loom larger than potential gains, but people do respond to fear. So whether it's like, for example, a safety summit rather than an opportunity summit or things like that. How do you find, that dynamic as you're advising people and sort of directing, ideas, demonstrating capabilities to sort of balance between the fear factor and opportunities?
What an interesting question. The Safety Summit's a great example, and I think, when we were talking to the ministers in Cabinet Office about what we were doing with AI, they were actually very conscious that there was a lot about safety and really not a great deal about the opportunity, which is literally the purpose of this programme, is that if we don't grasp the opportunity, we only have the downside and not the upside. The sort of, when it comes to communicating, things like loss aversion are, again, very, very important. And you're quite right, people experience equivalent amount of loss is twice as bad as the same amount of gain. So if you lose a tenner, it's twice as bad as if you find a tenner. But the way that you frame that again is you can do quite a lot with, right? So if I come in and say to you, you've got a guaranteed £10, or you can give me the £10 and you might win £100. People won't take that bet. Whereas if you say to them, would you like to, go for a really confident bet on winning a tenner, or like a less confident bet on winning 100, and same statistics, they're much more likely to take that bet the second time because you haven't phrased it as losing. So again, when we're talking to policymakers, if you say, well, if you do this, you will lose the thing, you'll get a very different response than if you frame it as both future-looking. So here's an outcome and here's an outcome. So all those things are very important. And a lot of the kind of decision-making influence that we do and again, my job is not to make decisions. That's very much not what we're supposed to do. But we are trying to get other people into the right frame of mind of making decisions. And that comes into the way you frame, how about if we thought about opportunity rather than loss? And that's really where this programme has come from. But it is a very big risk to not think about the opportunity cost of really gripping these sorts of things, which is why I think it's very important to us.
I know we struggle with that. I mean, we are, you would have heard if you were here earlier, many of my colleagues, myself included, we tend to be glass half full. And we don't want to overlook risks. We don't want to overlook problems, but getting that balance right, very tricky. One last comment as I throw it to the room. Did you not notice how inherently interdisciplinary this work is? How it's drawing from so many different fields in order to be able to do the good that you're after. So I think that's a plea for all of us, and it's kind of a bit of an advertisement for the fact that we're teamed up here with the London School of Economics. We have a lot to benefit from the arbitrage across these two different worlds. As you take this into real-world applications where you've got hard problems, you do need that. So a question from the audience. Okay, thanks, Ellie.
Oh, hello. I'd like to say it was a really great presentation. I really loved how it started with Kahneman and all those references. I just studied so much in school, and those were what made me move to study AI later for my master's years ago. But now I actually work for the government here. I did work for the government in Brazil for over 10 years, and I also had some relations in the past with the government of Portugal. So I could see how these different governments would work with decision-making and also the implementation of new technologies, even before AI. And there are some challenges that I'd really like to understand your perspective, because you're seeing way higher level than I'm seeing. Like I'm in a certain department, you're way above. Is that I see that each department has their own set of rules and tools for AI. They don't see, I don't see how they work together with other departments. It seems like the policy is not unified. Of course, Ofcom it's the one that comes with regulations, but I think it's mostly for society, not exactly for the implementation in government. And it is quite frustrating. One of those government examples you show there, I'm not going to say which one, but I'm directly involved in one of them. To be completely fair, we're wasting a lot of money because we're not using AI, we're not using data, and there are some, like the main restrictions that I see are behavioral. We're used to that, like this is how we've been doing since always, and also I would say not only regulation itself, but the whole legal system, the whole way that you think about regulation, you think about implementing a new law and how you can enforce that to to the stakeholders. Like, for instance, big companies that have to develop some infrastructure that is strategic, that it's important, that it's urgent for society, but you don't use AI for that. And some of the parties say, okay, this is how we're going to design this infrastructure. It's like, well, how can we say that that's not optimal if we don't have anything? First, we don't use those instruments for that. And even if we did, how could we enforce that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear and relate to your frustration. It's still a very difficult environment, and there's the cultural point, and there's also just the fact that it's a phenomenally complex and very, very old system. And very early on, when we were sort of figuring out what we're going to do with this program, I was speaking to the new permanent secretary, Kat Little, in Cabinet Office, and she come over from the Treasury. And she said, well, the thing is, we've got calculations that show there's a £38 billion opportunity in the public sector alone for adoption of AI. And you're here telling me 30 million here and 900 million there. How do we get the 38 billion? I say, oh, absolutely no idea. I can do the things that I can do, which is this sort of thing. And by doing them, I can show other people how to do it. I've never seen it work to move the dial where we just say, right, across government now we're going to share data. It still doesn't really happen. But when you do go to departments and say, here's one we made earlier, and it's the same with everything, you put it in people's hands. The other day, my deputy, I was having a chat to him on Teams, and we were going to have a meeting, and he said, have you used the new Teams Loop? And I said, no. And he said, and I wasn't interested, incidentally. And he said, no, it's really, really good. You can turn it on, you can have like a live agenda that you adjust in real time, and you can both adjust it. So I said, okay, lovely. And he said, have a go. And I said, I will. And he went, no, have a go now. And he made me do it while I was sat there. And I love it, and it's brilliant, and I know how to do it now, and I use it for all my meetings. But if someone hadn't sat there and gone, right, do it, it wouldn't have happened. And I think that's what's been lacking in government, and in fact, in a lot of other governments. So I was in the White House, I think about 3 weeks ago, and lots of governments there, and they're all talking about AI adoption. And the US government said, we're very, very proud of our guidance to our civil servants. It's really permissive. It really encourages people to get on with it and do it. It's a great piece of work. They are quite disappointed that it hasn't had any uptake and no one's doing it. I paraphrase, it's not that bad. If we can't get people just doing it and picking the opportunity up and running with it, no one else will do it either. So literally my approach, and you've seen here, what can I solve? I can give people a free data sharing solution so they don't have to go to Deloitte or, in this department, and then Palantir in that department, all the other companies that are out there. Not that they don't have a place in the ecosystem, they do, but I can give you a free data sharing, and then you can share data. We can take your civil servants and teach them how to code in Python and then send them back again. And then you'll have some people that know how to code in Python, and they've built their own little AI chatbot while they were doing it. So I think I'm just a really big fan of the targeted intervention, because when you look at the whole government problem, it gets really depressing quite quickly in certain spaces. The way you try and change a really big system like that's really, really hard. But when we pick specific things and go, I can make this better, I can make this public service better, I can have it so that when somebody phones up Citizens Advice or the bereavement service, they get a better answer and they get it much faster, then I feel really good about my life and I sleep better. So I think all I can really recommend to you is just, pick the thing that you think you can impact and run at that. And if we're all doing that, then things will meaningfully change. But it is very hard. And everything is hard when you've got an old system. Our rail infrastructure isn't as good as Japan's. It just started earlier. So we have to try and fix the things we can. And that, I think, is one of the core joys of public service, is sometimes you get a win and you see it impacting people. That's a bit of a ramble, but I do feel very strongly about it.
So I'm conscious of the fact that we have drinks out there, but I feel if we only have the one question, it will feel like we've just gypped you terribly. So do we have a new hand raiser who wants to ask a question? Just checking, just in case.
You didn't see the audience. Yeah, you should have planted people.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
I know. I could have said,
Yeah.
when I ask that question,
Yeah,
will you
lean
then raise your
forward,
hand?
raise your
Okay,
hand.
fabulous. Well, there we go. With the, there we go.
Hi, thanks for a really insightful and great presentation. Really learned a lot. My question is, we talk a lot about data, and similarly to gentlemen over there, I have some experience from government and various other places, and if I had a pound for when somebody said, I want to be data-driven, we need to be data-driven, I would be enormously rich by now. And I remember when I was once hired as a chief data officer in an institution, and the CEO said to me, your mission is to make us data-driven. And I remember at the time, I said, okay, I'll do the data, but you will do the driven. We can give data to people, but they need to use it. And what I really found very inspiring in your presentation is not even about the data and the great things that you did with the data, even though they're wonderful, but the sort of interdisciplinary psychological science and practice of decision-making. So my question is, how can you, because I think there's a lot of value in it, how can you share? Are you doing anything to share that experience and that knowledge and that practice across the government, but also in other institutions? Because I think this is the kind of knowledge that is a real power and can make a real difference between the success and failure of all these approaches. So that's my question.
It is something I think is very important, and there's an annual civil service conference called Civil Service Live, and I did an hour in about 14 towns last year, exactly on all the data evidence behind making better decisions for yourself and trying to influence other people to make better decisions. So we really do try and communicate that. And we also work very hard on our relationships with departments so that they can see that we're trying to do things in their benefit. And then this year, Civil Service Live, I'm doing the Bluffer's Guide to AI road tour. And the purpose of that one is to show people, basically AI stems down to some very simple things, 3 things you could draw on a bit of paper in terms of 3 different types of charts. And therefore, it's not as complicated as it sounds, and get people into the idea that you don't have to go and buy it from somebody. You don't have to necessarily go out to a big contract to get AI embedded. We can build it ourselves, and we can do it really well. So the communication thing is very important, but I do come and do these kinds of things fairly often as well, and hopefully the word spreads. I think a lot of people have stolen some of our concepts.
That was a good pitch, wasn't it? I hope some people are thinking, oh, we'll apply.
Feel free to steal it.
Lucky last. Ralph, do you have a question?
I think it might have been this gentleman.
Oh,
there.
yeah, James, sorry. I didn't see it.
Come on.
Well, you've got the mic between you, so.
Quick question. We have an election coming up.
Not allowed to comment on government policy.
No, not going to ask you about that. Don't worry. Our tax is going up. No, I'm joking. In terms of the level of interference that we're seeing from a social media AI perspective, are you concerned about the level that you're seeing, or an expectation perhaps that we should expect more of it? And what are you planning to do about that, if you're able to comment?
I mean, so there is a new task force, which I think is called the Defending Democracy Task Force, that is specifically focused on this area of work. I was a lot more afraid of it a year ago than I am now. I think the level to which I thought it would hit, it hasn't been quite as high as that. But social media was a problem long before this. And, you know, particularly with social media, what you find is companies that deliberately provoke discord and conflict to make money. They're still doing that. They're probably doing it in more efficient ways. And people not knowing what to trust online. And that was true really a long time before ChatGPT, etc., made it easier to spread misinformation. I think, on balance, that people might be slightly better informed than they were, or maybe slightly more wary. And one of the things I thought was very interesting a few months ago, for example, and I think this is quite clever, is that so the Conservative Party put out a Rishi generator. And you can go on their website and you can get the Prime Minister to give somebody a message, any message you want. But that's quite clever, isn't it? Because if you then see a fake Rishi on Facebook, you've already got a pretty good idea that it could well be fake. So teaching people, you know, how easy it is to make these sorts of fakes, I think is quite impactful. But I mean, longer term, it continues to be a massive problem. And psychologically, the question of where people turn when they don't know who to trust, I think that is the thing that worries me the most. You know, elections will come and go and people will fight them. But if you genuinely don't know who to believe, what do you do next? I think as an impact on society, I'm very concerned about that. So yes, worried about it. There are a lot of people working on it. And I think that there is possibly space for legislation around this. Certainly a lot of people are looking into it, but it's not a solved problem by any means. And I imagine that a lot of the very clever researchers are trying to figure out ways to reduce information in many spheres as we speak. Fortunately, I've got the easier job of just fixing public service, so I'll take the win there.
I'm happy to say we have quite a few people that are starting to work on this here and growing. So.
Well, genuinely come and join us. We really do need people to red team things and you know, come and have a look at the code. If we can improve on it, you tell us. We'll credit you. And yeah, you can help us save money and save lives.
That's it. Okay. Well, fantastic.
Is it wine time?
Let's do another
Yeah.
Warm round of applause, shall we? Thank you very much. We have a drinks reception outside, so let's go enjoy that.
Just the right time for that as well.